Hi, kids. My name is Mrs. Duckett, and I'm here with my helper, Ian. And we are coming to you live to do the children's story for the Haven Church. So, we're going to be talking about one of God's creatures that brings me a lot of joy. I think that this creature is actually kind of funny looking and it makes me giggle a little. So, I wanted to talk to you about it. And the reason I thought of the ostrich is I was thinking about our current times, and we're at home still, and we're quarantining, and we're all trying to stay healthy. And there is some Bible verses that give us some ideas for how we can stay healthy. And one of them is a cheerful heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit makes one sick. And you can find that verse in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22. And again, like I said, the ostrich brings me joy and cheer. But also, scientists have been studying the ostrich for a long time, and they noticed something as they were studying them. They noticed that ostriches don't get sick very often, like hardly ever. They're a very healthy creature. And so they started studying them, and some are even trying to use ostriches to make medicine for humans to help us stay as healthy. We can learn something from these creatures and we can stay healthier. Some other cool facts about the ostrich are that they are so healthy they can live up to 75 years, and they can run as fast as a cheetah. They can run 70 miles per hour. I did not know that. But they cannot fly. They're a flightless bird, and they're the biggest bird, and they also lay the biggest eggs of any bird. You could feed like 13 people with one of their eggs. They live in Africa, and they like to eat bugs and all sorts of other things. They live in family groups, and yeah, they're just a really cool creature. And as part of our story, I thought if you wanted to, you could learn how to draw an ostrich. So Ian is drawing an ostrich. I'm going to draw an ostrich, and if you want, you can give it a try. So I'm going to start by drawing the ostrich's eyes. And since I'm using black paper, I have to use light colors. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see my picture. So I am actually going to make it look like my ostrich's head is turned like this. So I'm going to start with one of my eyes over here, and I'm just going to draw a circle, kind of a big circle because ostriches have really big eyes. And then I'm going to make a line from there and draw another circle over here, because remember, my ostrich is going to be looking sideways, and Ian's ostrich is looking straight at you. All right, so that is my ostrich's pupil. They have big pupils, make kind of like a crescent moon shape for my ostrich's iris, the colorful part of the eye. And then something cool about ostriches are they have really beautiful eyelashes, really long. I'm going to make my ostrich's eyelashes gray. I'm going to start at kind of the tip, and I'm going to just make lines. Well, gray is not showing up, so I'm going to use white for right now for my ostrich's eyelashes. Over here and do the same thing. Make my art look symmetrical. And if you look, my eyelashes on this side look a little thicker and bigger, so I'm just going to go back over here and make them a little thicker and bigger over there. I'm going to give my ostrich purple irises. I'm going to color in purple here. Ian is working on the feathery part of his ostrich by just making lines. After you draw the eyes and the beak, that's the hardest part of this art project. After that, it's just lines from that point on. So the beak is kind of tricky. So I'm going to start by making a hill. I'm going to do kind of a straight line. I'm going to go up and then it's going to go straight again. So it's like you're in a car, you're going to drive straight, go up over a hill and back down. So let's do that. And it's kind of in between but below the two eyes. So straight up and down. That's the top part of my beak. And I'm going to curve around like this, and it's kind of like an upside down hill now. I'm going to go straight a little bit, and then I'm going to go down, and then I like to come over here and go down. And look at that, I have created my beak. I'm going to give it some nostrils because they do need to breathe, and those look like little watermelon seeds on the beak. And then I'm drawing just another line so that you can kind of see that a beak has two parts. It has the bottom and then the top. And now I'm going to start making my lines. I'm going to start by making some lines that go around the beak, and then they're going to get longer. I can add different colors. So I'm going to just go up and kind of curve around the beak there, go around there. So I'm going to start by making kind of the general shape of the neck, like that. I'm just looking here. And there you go. It kind of looks like he's peeking in from the corner of the page there. And then I'm just going to do the lines. Using some of the same color. Well, I can continue to add details to my ostrich, but as you can see, it's coming along quite nicely. I would love to see if any of you decide to do an ostrich, if you could send a picture to Pastor Josie, if you could email it. I would love to see how your ostriches turn out. And remember, a cheerful heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit makes one sick. Proverbs 17:22. I hope that all of you are staying healthy and well, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.
Then a teacher of the law stood up. He was trying to test Jesus. He said, "Teacher, what must I do to get life forever?" Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" The man answered, "Love the Lord your God, love him with all your heart and your soul, and all strength and your mind. Also, you must love your neighbor as you love yourself." Jesus said to him, "Your answer is right. Do this and you'll have life forever." But a man wanted to show show the way that he was living was right. So he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?"
Good morning, and I am so glad to be joining you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that the kids enjoyed making an ostrich and learning how to do something fun and unique. I hope you're able to share some of those videos with me. I want to thank Amber and Ian for helping us do church today. And also all of our AV team that is working with me right now to make sure that this stream is going well. Thank you for your work and for your help. It's nice to do this with such an amazing team. I am continuing on in our series, The New Normal. And it is really difficult right now to really understand what that is. I met with a task force, and their main job in our church is to see what church would look like if we were to meet in person. And there were so many things that we had to do that was different. We talked about having to wear face masks all the time and limiting the number of people using our restrooms, where the best space was to meet, how far back people would be sitting, and what it would look like for me to join the congregation. We just went all over the church and talked about things that needed to be cleaned and had to go over guidelines for OSHA and for the conference, because we have to have a written form before we can actually meet that is approved and that has been approved by our board. The task force will be meeting again next week on Friday to put together a document to be presented to our board so that our board can overlook all of those things and we can finally get something submitted. I just want to thank you so much for all of the love and the care that you've been giving to each other. I want to thank those of you who stopped by to drop off a birthday gift to help me celebrate my quarantine birthday. And I just am so grateful for the community that we have here. I want to jump right in. Our parable is on the Good Samaritan, and I know that we've heard this story before, but this is the story that we're talking about because I feel like it's really reflective of what has been going on this week. It has been crazy. All of the changes that have been going on, and then on top of that, all of the difficulties that we find in terms of race relations and in terms of seeing oppression, in terms of some people who aren't wanting to touch that subject and other people who are wanting to stand in solidarity with their brothers and sisters, even though they look different. I want us to jump into this with that in mind. So the parable of the Good Samaritan starts with a certain lawyer who stood up and wanted to test Jesus. This Good Samaritan story starts because somebody wanted to challenge Jesus in a public setting. So what happened is he asked Jesus this question: "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And I can just imagine in my mind's eye that they were smug because they thought that they had gotten Jesus into a place where no matter what he said, it wasn't going to be the right answer. And he said to him, "Well, what's written in the law? How do you read that?" And so the lawyer says, quoting Deuteronomy chapter 6 from the Shema, it says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength." And then quoting Leviticus 19, "And love your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus says to him, "You've answered rightly. Do this and you will live." So we went from talking to eternal life to living. How do I inherit eternal life? Do this and you will live. But he wasn't satisfied. He actually wanted to justify himself. And so he wanted to make sure that he looked good. And so it's so interesting, and I'm taking a pause. It's so interesting the dual conversations that are being had right here, because before we're even told the story about what it looks like to be good, it's in the midst of someone treating Jesus poorly, wanting to make themselves look better than Jesus. And so as we think about that, we'll go on. So what he says is, you have answered rightly, do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself and said, who is my neighbor? And so what Jesus did is he tells this parable about somebody going from Jerusalem to Jericho. So on the way back from Jerusalem, this person is robbed. They're robbed and they're left practically dead. You know, we've talked about this before. If you touch a dead body, you are considered unclean and you cannot go in and worship. There are laws that you have to keep in order for you to be ceremonially clean and go into the temple and to be able to worship. Because if not, then you contaminate the whole temple. And so a priest walks by, and we know that the priest is going towards the temple, and there's no way that a priest could chance touching a body that was left for dead. This is understandable. Everybody that's listening to this gets this part of the story. It's expected that both the priest and the Levite pass this person by. But then there's a Samaritan that walks by. The Samaritan, we've talked about this before, Samaritan means dog. They looked different because they had racially blended with other cultures of the time. These were the people that were not taken into Babylon. They were left behind. They were not the elite. They were the poorer people of that time. And so when the Babylonians came and took the Jewish leadership and the Jewish royalty to Babylon, these were the commoners that were left behind, and they intermarried with the people back in that time, and they were called Samaritans. And if you even think about what is going on in Israel right now, the Samaritans are the ancestors of the Palestinians, and the Jewish nation is still continuing on in terms of Jews, and so even now there is that biblical tension that between the two races and the two religious beliefs. If you've ever been to Israel, you know that it is a very potent tension between these two people groups. Well, we don't really need to go too far away to understand what it's like to have religious, economic, and racial tensions, because we've experienced a lot of that here in the United States. Not too long ago, just a little bit ago, there was somebody who died unnecessarily and has started an uproar. You know, Martin Luther King said that protests and rioting was the outcry of the voiceless, those who would not otherwise be heard. And we're seeing the pain that is being rippled through the United States in the Black community. There are people that are now talking and have already done conferences and webinars and interviews on Black mental health and what it does to the health of the men and women in the Black community to see constant violence against somebody that looks just like them. I talk to friends of mine just to check in on them and see how they're doing. And even here in California, it's just this sense of, I talked to someone this morning, it feels like it could happen to me. And I've never really felt that way before. These are my brothers and my sisters, my friends, that are feeling this way, and it frustrates me to know that even as a pastor in the Northern California conference said, I find myself trying to be extra nice to people while I'm walking down the street and I'm looking over my shoulder. I've never done that before. Like, this is too much. When one of our members of the body is hurting, we all hurt. And so many of us might even wonder, how do I deal with this? Well, let's go on in the story. So then the Samaritan comes by and picks up the person that is half dead, puts him on his donkey, and then takes him to an inn and heals him. Starts to heal him, puts wine and oil, heal the wounds, cover them up, gives money to the innkeeper and says, I'm going to come back. And this person must have been reputable. Gives him money and says, I'm going to come back. Whatever you need for this person, put it on my tab. What does it look for us? What does it look like for us to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters who suffer at the hands of people they've never known before because of the way they look, because of the accent that they have, because of the fact that their skin is a little bit darker? There is this activist and educator named Jane Elliott, and there has been this it's almost as if this has been going viral, but there's this video that's been going on, and I'll put the link in our session for today. But she says this. She says, in a group of students, she's lecturing, and she says, I want every white person in this room who would be happy, and she herself is white as well, would be happy to be treated as this society in general treats our citizens, our black citizens. If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our black citizens do in this society, please stand. And nobody stood. You don't understand the directions, she said. If you white folk want to be treated the way blacks are in our society, stand. Nobody is standing here. That says very plainly that you know what's happening. You know you don't want it for you. I want to know why you are so willing to accept it or allow it to happen for others. The things that we see on the news that have been happening, I saw an interview with a young gentleman who was a witness and had been trained in how to be a security guard and had been working with officers, how to detain people, say that the things that he saw were not common practice and aren't things that are taught. And he said he tried to intervene and wasn't heard. And when the interviewer asked him what it was that he saw, he said, and it just, tears started rolling down his eyes. He's like, I knew they were going to kill him. I knew that was going to happen, and I didn't want it to happen, and I didn't know what to do. I don't know what it's like to fear for my life. I don't know what it's like to fear for my life at a routine stop by police officers. I have great respect for those that I've known in my exposure to the men and women that serve, some family members. I don't know what it's like to live in the South where racism is so potent. There are some places that certain people know not to go to. I heard stories of men who would drive through Tennessee in particular. They made sure that before they got to the other side of before they passed the border into Tennessee, that they had a full tank of gas and wouldn't have to stop. They said they were under the speed limit every time they drove through Tennessee. And in a time of emergency where they had to drive through Tennessee, they said that they were extra cautious because they did not want to get stopped at night. I don't know what that feels like. Here, this person is traveling alone. While they're traveling alone from Jerusalem to Jericho, robbers come and take everything but the last breath of his life. And the person that saves him is not the pastor. He's not the elder of the church. But is the one that got kicked out of the church because their sin was measurable. I hope we can just stop for a second and figure out how in the world we can be a part of a solution. How in the world, what it looks like for me to speak out against racism and not just be passively non-racist. That's hard, but it's necessary. And it is gospel. There are people that we have never met, that have never offended us, that have never disrespected us, that have just looked different from us, come from a different country maybe, come from a place where we didn't grow up, come from a subculture of America. And not that one is better or worse than another, but sometimes, even unconsciously, we could be a part of the problem when we say that our culture is the norm and everyone should follow our culture. How can we be a part of the problem? And I believe the only thing that we can do is to fervently pray that God reveal that to us and to let that be our prayer. I believe that God is calling Christians to stand up against injustices in the same way that he was talking to this lawyer that wanted to justify himself. That person that can talk their way out of anything was trying to get Jesus to look worse than themselves. And Jesus took the words that they used and said, well, how do you read it? Well, what were you taught? And you're absolutely right, do that. Well, who's my neighbor? And essentially, Jesus says this in the story. That person you've never met. But for some reason, you want to walk closer to the other side of the sidewalk when they pass by. Maybe you clench your purse a little bit tighter. I remember walking through the streets of Chicago. There were several homeless people at the time. I was walking with a girlfriend, just arm in arm, like girls do. And it was cold. We were all trying to stay warm. Homeless man walks by. He was white. And we just continued walking. Another homeless man walked by. And he was not white. His skin was much darker. And suddenly I felt the push of the other person's body shoving me to the other side of the sidewalk. I remember holding myself firm so that I couldn't be pushed, and we walked on. And my friend said later, I was trying to get you to move to the other side of the sidewalk and you didn't do it. Why not? And I pointed out to them, there were two homeless people that passed us by. The first one you didn't flinch at, and the second one you were scared of. She didn't even notice. I'd never noticed that before. I didn't even realize I'd done it. And we talked about it. There are so many things that we are not aware of in our own selves. And I'm so glad that in this text that Jesus takes the racism, Jesus takes the religious biases and says, no, we've got to turn that on its head. And the problem that Jesus finds over and over again are the leadership who don't necessarily care for more than looking good in front of people. We can't be those people. We can't be the people that stand by and let injustices happen. We must speak out when we see something wrong. We must support when we know a sub-community, any community, is hurting, but specifically the sub-communities that often get overlooked. We must, just like we heard in our Mother's Day sermon, stand in solidarity, suffering as they suffer. So the same person, Jane Elliott, wrote another, she's the one that came up with the famous sociological experiment on the blue eyes versus the brown eyes. If you take an anthropology, sociology, or psychology, you, I'm sure, have heard this. She talks about the purpose of the exercise is to give these nice blue-eyed folks the opportunity to find out how it feels to be something other than white in the United States. And she says this, these people today are going to learn more than they want to know. The purpose of this exercise is to help these people walk in the moccasins of a person of color for a day. What I'm going to do is assign these people on the basis of their eye color alone, all the negative traits that we have assigned to females, to people of color, to gays and lesbians, to people who have disabilities of any kind, to those who are obviously physically different. We are going to lower our expectation for these people, and we are going to force them to live down to our expectations of them. That was her definition of racism, sexism, discrimination of any kind. We are going to lower our expectations for these people, and we are going to force them to live down to our expectations of them. may we never participate in that. May we be actively searching for the places in which we force that upon people that are different from us. And we all have it. May we all ask for God's guidance. And may we give people something to live beyond all of the negative things they hear from society, from the news, from the people around them. In the same experiment, I think the blue eyes and the brown eyes were switched. And what they did, the only difference that they did, was to say that this certain eye color, whether it was the blue eyes or the brown eyes, one of them, and I think they switched midway through the experiment, one group was told that they were smart and intelligent. Every time they did something good, it was praised. The other group was told that they were going to amount to nothing. And every time they did something, they were told, see, I knew you couldn't do it. And other much more negative things than that. So which of these three do you think was a neighbor who fell among the thieves, to the man who fell among the thieves? He who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. May that be your new normal. Amen.